Hi everybody, it's Az here from Heel vs Babyface. Now, the World of Warcraft is going through a very difficult transition period. And what I mean by that is the transition from the final content patch of one expansion going through to the first content patch of another expansion. And the time between these 2 points invariably tends to be rather long. We had ICC from Wrath of the Lich King for 12 months, and we had Dragon Soul from Cataclysm for over 10 months. And believe it or not, in 2 weeks' time, we'll actually be celebrating the 5th month anniversary of Siege of Orgrimmar. And the beta for Warlords of Draenor still hasn't arrived. So let's just say, for argument's sake, the beta for Warlords arrives at the beginning of March. The rumour mill would have us believe that Warlords of Draenor is actually further advanced in its beta than that of Mists of Pandaria, which lasted for round about 8 months. So even if we give it the benefit of the doubt and say that the testing period is going to last between 4 to 6 months, then the chances are we won't actually see the live product till around about the July-Augusty time of this year. Which means Siege of Orgrimmar would have been with us for approximately 10 to 11 months. Now, this is always going to be a problem when you run a subscription-based model. Here in the UK, it costs me approximately £9 a month to play the World of Warcraft. And if the new expansion isn't released for another 10 to 11 months, in essence, Blizzard are asking me to pay approximately £90 to £100 for patch 5.4. And when no new content arrives in that time, that's rather a lot of money. So this is the period where you tend to see the biggest drop off in subscriptions, full stop, irregardless of how good or bad the game is. But if we look at patch 5.4, you've got to confess there are some serious issues when it comes to the pacing of it. Timeless Isle, in essence, is a good idea. It's a sandbox zone that allows you to do what you want, and it allows you to go at your own pace, but only to a certain degree. On the day of release of patch 5.4, I played for approximately 8 hours, and I walked away from the Timeless Isle with 52 epics. I was notching up approximately 6 to 7 epics an hour, which I could then send to all of my alts and get them pimped up. It took me, in a few short hours, something to do which most likely should have taken round about 2 months or so. Now then, I don't believe the Timeless Isle should have released in patch 5.4. I think it should have arrived a little bit later. I believe it was big enough that we had the final raid in Mists of Pandaria, the Siege of Orgrimmar, with a lot of bosses to do. But raiding burns you out. That's just a fact. And after doing boss fight upon boss fight, it would have been a nice break to 2 or so months later suddenly having the Timeless Isle. You could have gone at your own pace, you choose what you do, you relax a wee bit, and then you're ready to get back into the raiding content. Now, there was a game that had a very similar idea to this, and it came out 15 years ago, and this is Final Fantasy VIII. Now, Square seem to understand that when you're playing a heavy storyline game which had approximately 50 to 60 hours worth of content, you're gonna get yourself burnt out. So what they did is they put a minigame into Final Fantasy. And this mini-game was the Triple Triad card game. So when you were burnt out from doing the story and you wanted to take a break, instead of turning the game off, you stayed on the game, but you went a completely different tangent. Instead of going around beating massive bosses and doing deep storyline, you just went up to NPCs, clicked onto them and said, "Do you fancy a game of cards?" and then suddenly you could get involved in the triple triad card game with them. And what was big about it is it was really addictive. It wasn't just a crappy piece of shit, it was really, really fun to do. Square already understood that the popularity of this game could be rather big. So even when you defeated certain bosses, they dropped themselves as cards. There was loads of different ranks to the card system. You could fight certain people that may have a special card in their pack to try and get, and you could also lose cards to other people who would then leave an area. You could meet up with them later and be able to get bigger and better cards because of it. Very, very clever indeed. So this whole relaxation process, this whole change of pace, didn't actually involve you leaving the game whatsoever. Now, World of Warcraft could seriously have done with adopting this process too. I am, of course, talking about Hearthstone. I personally believe that Hearthstone could and potentially should have been integrated into the World of Warcraft. Hearthstone could have acted as that change of pace. Hearthstone could have acted as that distraction to stop you from getting burnt out. And Hearthstone could have acted as that additional content to keep you going. Think of it this way. Any mob in Pandaria, or in the world, in the whole of Azeroth, could potentially drop a card. That's just a percentage drop from it. It might be low, it might be high, but it's a percentage drop from it. Rare elites have X% chance of dropping maybe a special card, a higher card, things like that. Archaeology, I did a video on this yesterday. They could have been Hearthstone cards in the ground. They could drop from raid bosses, for goodness sake, an incentive to keep on raiding. They could have been on the Timeless Isle as another additional facet. There could have been an X% drop in the treasure chests, or a potential drop from defeating the Celestials, or from pet battles, or things like this. There are lots of ways to generate cards. You could have used a scenario as the tutorial. We've had the proving grounds. There's no reason why a scenario shouldn't have been used to produce some sort of training tool for Hearthstone, get people set up with a basic deck, and on top of that, it wouldn't even have to compromise Blizzard's pay model either, because you could have used the queuing system which we see now with looking for raid and dungeons and scenarios to be your arena. On top of that, you wouldn't have even had to have taken out the cards on the Blizzard store. You could put card packs on the Blizzard store. Make it people's prerogative whether or not they want to fork out real life money for extra decks, just as they do now. You could have also have had the option of still being able to play the game on your ISO device when you weren't logged into the World of Warcraft from your PC. So you could still lie in bed of a night and lounge and play Hearthstone against people. Now, of course, if you're doing all of this, then you're still paying your monthly subscription to do so. And I'm not trying to get more money out of us, but even from a business point of view, it kind of makes a lot of sense. And if Hearthstone is that popular, which I believe it will be, I don't think too many people would have even have minded to keep on paying their subscription, even if they weren't logging in the game to raid or to do dungeons or scenarios or whatever, even if they just were logging onto the game to go card hunting, or even if they weren't even logging onto the game but simply playing from their ISO devices or wherever. It was a great way to still maintain your subscription to the World of Warcraft in a difficult period where content is lacking. Now, we don't know how many subscribers are going to leave the World of Warcraft from now until Warlords of Draenor is going to be released. I don't think things like the Iron Sky Reaver or something like that is going to be enough to generate interest for people to decide to stay on the game. Sure, it's nice and pretty to look at, but it's just a mount. People want content. People want something to do. And Hearthstone could have easily have filled that gap. Now, when I completed Final Fantasy VIII, I notched up 100+ hours. I can't tell you what number it was because the clock actually stopped at 100 hours. And I dread to think how many hours in that were taken up purely by playing the triple triad card game. Now, you just imagine Hearthstone being integrated into the World of Warcraft and all the bells and whistles that you could do to get the cards in the big wide world, raid bosses, archaeology, etc, etc. And I think you got nothing but a recipe for success. Let me run a scenario past you right now. Imagine it's the middle of last year. Patch 5.4 comes out on September the 10th, 2013 with the Siege of Orgrimmar. 2 months later, the Timeless Isle comes out with Hearthstone, the card game. Suddenly you had 2 massive changes of pace which could just revitalise yourself and keep you subscribed onto the World of Warcraft while it goes through the difficult transition period which we understand happens at the end of one expansion going into the next. You do the Hearthstone scenario, you get yourself some basic cards to go with your champions. And then you want to play some of the NPCs, so you travel around Pandaria, kind of like pet battles, finding the Hearthstone NPCs and fighting them. You defeat them, you get more cards. You want to play against people, so you open up your raid tab, your dungeon tab, and you queue yourself to play. You want to play ranked, you queue yourself for ranked, kind of like PvP. You want to play casual, you queue yourself for casual, and you just have a bit of fun. Nothing too serious. They could have the seasons like the PvP seasons that we have at the moment. And of course, there is that option to get potential rewards for doing those ranked seasons. There's so many variants that you can have by integrating Hearthstone into the World of Warcraft. It could really give it that extra bit of spice and that little bit of life going into a difficult period. Because what's great for Blizz is they say, well, if people are going to start getting a little sick of Hearthstone because they've been playing it for too long, well, guess what? Your next expansions come out and everybody's got too consumed with doing the new content from that expansion. They start to do all the early content, they go through 6.0, and then of course they start to work back on their Hearthstone cards. Not everybody, but I reckon it would be a very, very popular thing indeed. So I hope you enjoyed the vid. Please do like by clicking the thumbs up button, comment and subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook and also twitch.tv/Shield vs Babyface for live streaming, and I shall be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care, everybody. Bye bye.